Hello and welcome to the Big Purple Blob Morning Show. This podcast is hosted by 6 professional family life and wellness coaches who are passionate about helping the American diplomatic community thrive through their unique challenges. We are also eligible family members with over 100 plus years of combined experience living abroad. Trust us, we know what you're going through. So relax as we share some practical advice mixed with Foreign Service acronyms, empathy, wisdom, and a bit of humor.
Good morning, listeners. You are back with another episode of the Purple Blobs Morning Show, and I am Parent Coach Angie. I'm here today with Susie Brown, who's our health and wellness coach. Today, we are talking about building community in our Foreign Service post, and if you're like me, back here in Virginia. And we'll do a little bit of chatting first of all, and I would love to hear how Susie's community is feeling right about now. She has a little bit of an update for us as far as schooling goes for her kids, and I would love to hear about that. If it's okay with you, if we start with that, Susie.
Yeah, so we are, my elder two are finally back to in-person schooling. So they haven't been in-person schooling since they went for just a couple weeks last spring, but then most of last year was also distance learning. So it's super exciting. So my middle son did break his wrist on the first day of school, but I made him go back the next day, and he was very grateful for it. But it's so nice to hear the updates from, classmates. And I mean, it's such a different experience for them school-wise. And I am so looking forward to when my younger son gets to go, because actually at our school right now, the middle school is the only one not going to in-person school. How about you, Angie? How are things with you?
Oh, that's huge, though. I love that you guys are going back, because it does make a difference. I remember when we went back and it was just hybrid. I actually asked my kids, this might be your only chance in your entire lifetimes where you can just sit at home, you can study from your bed. And I thought they enjoyed it, but they chose to go back to school. Is that like the minute they could go back, they were back. And it was just such a difference. And then slowly when clubs started opening up and different things started happening, and it was just such a huge, you don't realize what a big difference it is. You think in your mind like it should be a certain way, but then once it does happen, you're like, oh, those little tiny conversations of what did I miss from your day? You were actually apart from me. And those conversations are so much more richer, and you get so much more feedback than when you're sitting at home together all day. So I'm glad you guys are, for the most part, starting to head towards that direction. As for me, things are good, and the community is feeling like things are opening up, and I've been able to get involved with a couple of things, raising money for our seniors this year for their, what is it called, the all-night grad party, where instead of them going off and being so excited about graduating and then possibly drinking, we provide a safe space for them near the high school for all of the graduates to come so that they can play games and socialize and feel like they're celebrating without having to go off and be tempted with doing something they shouldn't be doing at the moment. So I joined that little fundraising committee, and it's nice because I get to do something great, but also I get to meet some other moms that I haven't seen, even though we've been in our new community for a year and a half now. So it's nice. So my community is going well.
That is the perfect segue to building community, right? That is one of the best ways to meet other families, other parents, is through the school. I think I'm probably like the Uber volunteer, in the sense of like, I'll volunteer for anything, because especially when we first get to a post, because that's such a great way to meet new families, new moms, new dads, just to connect with people outside of your little sphere. But it's also, I have found, probably the best way to meet people outside of the embassy community. And not to disparage the embassy community by any stretch, but it's so nice to expand your time overseas and meet these people who are from all over the world, and just the things you learn and the things you get to experience with these new friends. It's just it's really rewarding.
It's true. It's true. And it's a great way. I'd love to hear your tactic though, because if anyone listening actually attended our workshop we did a little while ago, I explained how I am such an introvert and I sort of take time to get involved in a community, and I sort of choose things carefully, and just the way I approach new environments is much different than the way an extrovert approaches entering a new environment. And I'd love to know your approach. Like you said, you go into volunteering. What's your general approach when you do then come into a new community and want to do volunteer or take part in volunteer opportunities?
Well, I mean, one of the most important things is you have to be really ready to be the new kid on the block, which is, it can be really intimidating. And also, you know, it's not a skill set that a lot of adults have, because generally speaking, most people stateside don't move as often as we do, especially in adulthood. And so, you know, you have to be that. You have to be mentally ready in order to go into whatever situation it might be. It might be, you know, a club coffee. It might be some orientation program. It might be, you know, the back to school day at school, or, you know, any one of these sorts of interactions. The diplomatic spouses group. It can be, I don't know. I mean, I could keep listing, but you have to be able to be, you know, accept that it's uncomfortable and accept that it is overwhelming and kind of scary to be that, you know, not to know anybody. And then, you know, I think for me, it helps to just, you know, give myself a goal. Like, okay, you made it this far, you made it to the meeting. If I can, I try and like catch a ride with someone, because then I already know someone at the meeting, right? Or, you know, show up and just say, I have to stay for at least 45 minutes. And, you know, make the rounds, talk to people who seem nice, talk to people who might seem familiar. Hey, I think you were at the orientation or whatever. Like, and then, you know, reevaluate at that 45-minute mark. Are you having an okay time? Have you met people? Do you think you can bear it for another, say, 15 or 20 minutes? And then just like breaking up the event into these baby increments, these tinier time frames that are very manageable. Anyone can do 15 minutes, right? And then if you get to the point where you're just like, yeah, I'm not having fun anymore, give yourself permission to leave. It's totally okay. So those are more of like the adult sorts of situations. Often, if you go to an event and your kids are there, it's a buffer, and you already have the distraction of taking care of your kids, right? Like even if they're older, even if they're teenagers, they're going to keep checking back, especially if you're kind of new to the situation or to the other groups. At least mine do. They always check back until they're much more comfortable. But that's when, you know, you might see kids from your kids' grades and you can go up and just chat. You might know some staff from the school if it's a school event, and just kind of start there, and then just start gradually, you know, same thing. Tell yourself you have to go up to at least 3 people and say, hey, so we're new in town. I'd really love to hear about your family and how long you've been here. You know, and start the conversation that way. The other really great way to meet people is when your kids are involved in sports or activities, and then you meet the parents of the other kids that are also involved in that sport or activity. You know, if you're sitting on the sidelines and your kid's out there playing basketball or soccer or whatever sport it is for the season, sitting down, maybe not right next to someone because that might make you feel uncomfortable, but somewhere near, and just say, oh, so is your kid out there? Which one is he? Or she? Sorry, mine are all boys. So it's an easy way to start a conversation. I remember our last post, one of my favorite people, I met her that way. And we were sitting on the sidelines watching our boys play soccer. At the end of the game, you know, we had just kind of been chatting the whole time. At the end of the game, she's like, well, can I ask you for your number, and maybe we can like get together. Our kids hang out at school, so like maybe we can hang out too. It was super cute because she was very nervous and very you could tell it was like kind of hard for her to do this. And then her husband, who was sitting with her, was like, well, maybe she doesn't want to give you her number. And it was just so funny and so comical that it was, we just start laughing. And of course, gave him my number and we became great friends. But it was just so funny, that comic relief is breaking the tension with a nice laugh. That's always good.
Oh, that advice that you shared in the beginning it's relevant for any person, an introvert, extrovert, kids, adults, people who are used to, getting out there, people who do it all the time, people who never do it. That idea of walking into a place of having a goal, like, oh, okay, I'm going to go in this big social circle right now and I'm uncomfortable. But when you have this sort of end in sight, you're like, okay, I'm going to stay for 15 minutes or 45 minutes. I'm going to have a goal of talking to at least 3 people to see if I find some kind of a vibe that I'm feeling. And then I can reevaluate. And it's okay. It's okay if I sit there and I'm this is not my situation that I want to be in. And then I evaluate and go, well, I tried, I did this. And then what happens though? People do get a chance to see you. Even if you've not spoken to them, they might be across the room. They're like, I didn't get a chance to go talk to Susie, but she looked like a kind person. And I noticed that she's brand new in our community. So I know the next time I see her, she's someone who's socialized. She's someone who comes out. I'm going to make an effort to go and, make sure I have a chance to go speak to her real quickly. Or once you see somebody over and over again, you're like, oh, I really want to go talk to that person. And so it's nice to have that little goal in sight if you're that person who's brand new into a community. Things are hard, but step out of your comfort zone and have that goal. And it's super helpful. And I don't know if listeners remember all of our story. You have 3 boys. I have 3 girls, and they're all in high school. And so I miss those days, Susie. I miss those days. It's sort of that we're at a weird situation where it's sort of because of COVID, and it's sort of because my girls are so old. I'm not meeting their friends' parents. I'm not meeting, I'm not sitting on the sidelines. My daughter plays volleyball, but we're sitting in a huge crowd, or we're sitting spaced apart, and the conversations don't happen naturally, and you're not sure which kid belongs to who. So the conversations don't happen. So we're not on the sidelines anymore. We're not going into classrooms. We're not doing things. And with high school and with COVID on top of that, you just don't have that sense of I'm meeting people because of my kids or through my kids anymore. Hence the reason I'm like, well, I need to do something, maybe the volunteering with the fundraising committee. And I joined another committee that's just locally based, and it's called Welcoming Falls Church. And it's just a community where we sort of sit together and think of how we can be welcoming to specifically people immigrating into the area, but also that gives me a chance to talk with other people who are living in the area, and then do some good and do things that you find some special connection with as well. But yeah, there's so many different ways to put yourself out there and to really get yourself involved in a community, get yourself involved in a school. Sometimes you just have to be creative and step out of your comfort zone, and sometimes you just have to think of things that it's not really something I'm used to doing, but it's something new that I need to do, and this is why I need to do it. But even if beyond to that, there are so many different ways when you are posted overseas, especially when you're walking to your local fruit stand or the grocery store, when you're ordering a coffee from the local cafe. A lot of times, especially if you're new, you're sort of focused on, you kind of don't want to be seen, right? You're on your phone, you're looking through Facebook, you're scrolling through Instagram. But if you take that moment to be mindful, maybe your local barista won't be your new best friend. The fruit stand lady won't be someone you go out with on a Saturday night. But when you walk through your community, how special would you feel when you have that same person greeting you every morning, or when you have a smile on your face and they return that smile to you? That's that sense of community that people look for. It doesn't have to be your best friend, but there's connections and relationships that we can make with people all around us in our community.
Exactly. I mean, humans are social creatures, right? So we do best in social situations when we have connections to not just people that we love and hold dear, but friends and acquaintances, we really need those connections. And especially for new people, but even for people who have been at Post for a while. I mean, it's really important to be open to those opportunities to connect with others at Post, right? So it's important to get over, I'm the new one, I won't know anyone else, or I don't think I would really like that activity, and just putting yourself out there. I love that you've found opportunities to pursue, a purpose, to give back. That's a great way to meet people. Other options might be like a book club, or a like-minded group of activities, sort of people pursuing, I don't know, like a painting. We have a painting group here, or join a workout group. There's so many other opportunities to find people to connect with, and it's also really, not just as parents and as adults, it's also really important to help our kids make these connections too, especially when they're new to schools and to communities. So, encouraging them to join sports or clubs or whatnot. I also think that it's really important for people who have been at Post for a while to step outside of their comfort zone and help connect with the new people. So, taking part in sponsor programs for kids too. Like a lot of, especially international schools, have these ambassadorial sorts of programs where they get to, email the kids that are coming into country at some point, and then they get to tell them about the school and about the city and about their friends and the clubs and such. I mean, it's a really important skill set to develop as adults and as kids.
It's funny. I think I took my lead from my own kids when we first moved, and you mentioned, joining a sport. If my daughter ever listened to this, she would kill me, but we talk about it all the time. And she's the one who told me this. So one of my twins, who's 16 years old, was asking around when she first started school, what kinds of sports there are. She knows that coming from overseas, the reputation in the US is sports are very, they're hardcore, and you have to have been training since you were 3 years old in order to join and in order to make a team. Well, she discovered that the softball team wasn't like that. Well, my one daughter really found her group, and my younger one found her group, found her people, found her BFFs last year in the volleyball team, but she loves volleyball and she can actually play the sport. My other daughter never played softball, didn't know how to hold a bat. She did when she was 4 years old. She was part of a little league team, but she didn't know the sport, but she really just wanted to meet people. And she had belonged to a couple of clubs, and she met a couple of people there. And this is when we're still doing hybrid. They opened up because softball is an outdoor sport. They opened up the season. It was a shortened season. And she thought, well, I want to do it. She discovered that she can indeed not play or not play softball very well, but she loved it. Every day I would pick her up, and she would just run to me like a 4-year-old from preschool. And she was just so excited. And she never talked about the actual sport. She never actually hit the ball, but she would talk with such joy about how, because in softball, there's a lot of sitting, right? So you're waiting for your turn and so she just talked about, I talked to so-and-so today, and we talked the whole time. Did you play? Well, she just loved being with people and kids her age and meeting people. And it was the same for the couple of clubs that she had joined. And so she had made friends from softball. She made friends from a couple of clubs. But then her twin sister also joined a couple of clubs. They weren't meeting in person. They sort of did a couple of things online, but they sort of fizzled out and didn't do anything after a while. And so she kept trying, but the clubs just weren't really that thing. And so what we had to focus on then was, this idea of so sort of step out of your comfort zone, right? Join clubs, join a fundraising committee like I did, or a local community or a library or book club, but it might not work out, but keep trying. And then also, even if you do join something, there's no guarantee that there's going to be an automatic friendship there. And so it's really important for kids and for parents themselves to understand and be patient with themselves. Like, you did join the book club, but you didn't meet your best friend. But what did you get out of it? There's got to be some little tangible thing that you can say, I did this, and this is what I received from that activity that I joined. And then keep trying. But that patience with yourself is really important, because when you first move to a new community, it's really easy to just sort of, okay, I'm just going to give up, especially if you're coming into somewhere that's still closed off, that's still very different. You don't know what to do. Restrictions are still in place. But really, it's important to be patient with yourself and know that things will happen, but sometimes they just happen super, super slowly. So for one of my girls, it was quick. One of my girls had to really get in there and try brand new things that she wasn't comfortable with. And another girl just had to keep trying and keep trying. And eventually, a year later, when she started 11th grade, then her groove was in there. But for most of 10th grade, it was, I'm trying, but it's important not to give up.
For her for continuing to try, though. I know that's really challenging. You keep putting yourself out there, and then, and it doesn't quite work out the way you want it to. Because you're right. Like, I think everybody knows when you're joining these groups, you're not necessarily going to meet your BFF, but making those connections, those are like-minded people. So it may very well be the people that you want to hang out with the most, outside of your spouse, of course. But it's always nice to have some sort of like social support outside of your spouse. We need that social support. We need that ability to, what happens if there's an emergency, right? So there has to be someone who you can call. Can you hang out with my kid while I go take my other kid to the doctor? Or, oh my gosh, I'm stuck at work. Can you go pick up my kid at school? Or, all of these sorts of different situations, they happen because emergencies happen. And the best way to be able to plan for them is to expand your support network as much as possible, cast that net wide. And that's not the only reason we go to these meetings. That's, for our own social wellness and our own mental and emotional wellness, being able to connect with other adults, other humans, it's really important. But it's important to try deliberately to create these connections in our community every time we move.
It is important. And sometimes it can be such a challenge. And sometimes, I'm using a lot of examples from high school, but sometimes even for us adults, when we step onto the embassy grounds, the embassy compound, it can feel like we're stepping back into high school, right? You can see the different social circles, and you can see, question, which social circle do I belong in? Which one am I going for? Which one's going to accept me? And it can feel like this big flood of, it's 9th grade all over again, right? When we're coming in, it's important to understand, then take a minute then to really absorb it and get to understand it and what's going on. And if you're making friends outside of the embassy compound, if you're making friends in the general expat area or in the local community, how do friendships form, and how is community made, and how easy is it, or how challenging is it to sort of enter that? Because it is kind of like that sort of high school, like if they already have their close friends, do they really need you to come in? And that's what your thought process is, right? Of course, everyone can do well with having lots of friends, and they're probably more accepting than you think they're being, but it can be different from post to post, and understanding culture norms within the local community, but also the culture of the embassy, the American expat group, and everyone else. We always have this different culture that we sort of have to understand and sort of get into. And then just an example of what I'm thinking when I say that is, like back in Hanoi, it was total commonplace for all expats to sort of hang out together. And so we would go out dancing, and at the marine balls, our local, or not our local, but our expat teachers from the international school would join us. We would go out to coffees with the international school teachers. And it was just, everything was just sort of a general expat community. And we did everything together. And that wasn't the case when we went to El Salvador. I didn't ask my daughter's math teacher to go out for a coffee. And when we went to El Salvador, even though they were from Australia, we had very much, different things in common. But in Hanoi, that was total commonplace. Oh, after school, let's go hang out at, it was a place called Joma. Let's go hang out at Joma and have a coffee together. And oh yeah, sure. Yeah. What are you doing Friday night? And that was totally normal. But it was a matter of understanding what that meant and how you then become friends with other expats and how, what's the sort of standard of relationships that you're entering. So it's just interesting how from country to country it can be completely different, and how things are made up are completely different.
Completely, you are absolutely right. Yeah, you have to decipher that culture kind of on the fly, because it's not like someone's going to come up to you and say, hey, so here is what we do. Here is, we hang out with these people, and then we do this on the weekends and blah, blah, blah. One of our posts when we arrived, it was extraordinary cliquish, and it was there was even a swimming pool on the compound. And obviously the only people in the swimming pool would be embassy families, because they're the only ones that had access to it. And I remember we hadn't even been in country for like a couple of days, but we go there with a social sponsor who had to then go and take care of something. And no one came up to talk to us. Like, no one. I just thought, like, well, I mean, clearly I'm with the embassy community. Why is no one even saying hi or acknowledging us? It was just, but you know, that was exactly what I needed to have that aha moment, to be like, I will never not say hi to families when I see them, not just at the pool, but like in general, like, hi, welcome. Who doesn't want to hear that, right? Like, anyway, it was fascinating. But that was the same, like, just a total aside, that was the same embassy that had the worst cliques I have ever seen in my life, especially like in the lunchroom. I mean, it was totally like high school, you know, where all the popular kids sit at the same table. So it was really nice when those groups left, not long after we arrived, to post like 6 months later. And so it was a very nice change in morale and like the social connections in the embassy. But it's every single one, they have a different culture.
Right. And it can change at one particular post, can change from year to year, because it's just like high school, right? There's a graduating class. They're replaced by the newbies. Maybe the newbies are a little bit nicer. I mean, it's hard to tell kids who are like struggling through high school, like basically you're going to have many social situations that will resemble this. But that's why it's also important to help kids to process what's happening, and when they are having challenges settling into a new community, what that all means in the grand scheme of things, and what that means personally for them. So it's this whole idea of, you know, processing new information, getting used to, and kids as they go from post to post are having to get used to so much, right? A new academic curriculum, new teachers, new friends, new people they celebrate holidays with. And so it's all, but it's, and even your kids who are seemingly doing everything fine, you know, quote unquote, fine, everything's going well. It's important to have conversations and to process step by step what's going on, how they're feeling, what struggles they might be having, because you can have a struggle and care about your day and be happy throughout your day as well. It depends on the kids. It depends on the situation. It depends on the timing, but it's all such a challenge, Susie, but it's also fun.
It is challenging fun. That is 100% it. This has been so much fun talking about communities and connections with you. Do you have any final thoughts?
Just the idea that giving yourself time, be patient with yourself, be patient with your kids. And I know that it can seem like it's a daunting thing to have to go through every 2 to 4 years. And you're like, why am I doing this again? Why am I doing this to my kids again? But the rewards will start to be seen as you continue to make those efforts and continue to put yourself out there and become part of the community. And becoming part of the community can mean something completely different for everybody. You don't have to, you know, volunteer for 15 different activities, get your kids involved in 12 different sports, and, you know, do all of this in order to feel like you're part of something. Find that rhythm that helps you to become happy and feel like you're part of something. What about you? What are your final thoughts?
I mean, I think you said it best. Like, just be gentle with yourself, be compassionate, and know what you need socially at that particular time in your life. Maybe you're right. Like, maybe you need plate every day if you have little kids, just for the sanity saver. Maybe you want to spend more time, self-reflecting and doing things on your own. But it's important to know what you need. So taking the time to really ask yourself what you were looking for, and then encouraging yourself to seek that and achieve that, I think is really important.
True. Wise words, Susie, wise words.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today, talking about communities and connection. And hopefully you will join us again for next week's podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Big Purple Blob Morning Show. It has been a pleasure to share our stories with you today. Now we want to hear from you. Tell us your story. Let us know your biggest challenge that you face at Post or back in the States. We also want to know what type of parenting support you need at this time. To connect with us, visit our website at thebigpurpleblob.com. If you found today's episode helpful, please share with your friends in the American Mission community. And remember, we want to hear from you because we are here for you.